A very good afternoon, and I would like to thank Professor Jasuja for giving me an opportunity to take up a case-based scenario of CRRT in context of hepatorenal syndrome. So this gentleman, who was a 39 years old male, a resident of Mizoram, was diagnosed with portal hypertension 3 months prior to his presentation. He had grade 2 esophageal varices, acute and chronic liver failure, which was alcohol related, and his last intake of alcohol was 3 months back. He presented with the jaundice of 1 month duration, ascites of 15 days duration, a decreased urine output of 7 days, and breathlessness for 2 days. So he took LAMA from Mizoram and he came to ILBS for further management. In the emergency department, he was found to have a shock with a mean arterial pressure of 58. He was tachycardic with a heart rate of 112, a respiratory rate of 24. He had all three components of SIRS and acute SOFA of 2/3. He had pallor and icterus and had pedal edema. He had tensitis and he was intubated and shifted to the ICU for breathlessness, shock, and metabolic acidosis. And this was his X-ray, which showed a huge lobar consolidation. He had some paralytic ileus and gastric distension. His PF ratios were 197. His FiO2 after intubation was 50. His pH was compensated. However, his bicarbonate was 15. He had hypophosphatemia with a phosphate of 5.5, mild hypokalemia. Urea creatinine was 62 and creatinine of 2.21. His urine output post-catheterization was 50 to 60 ml. Ammonia was 177. And we can see here deeply jaundiced bilirubin of 39, INR of 7.17, leukocyte count was 24, and NLR ratio of 45. His XTEM was showing a prolonged CT. There was no SBP, and this patient had a normal echocardiogram. So the working diagnosis of a unit was this patient who was acute and chronic liver failure due to alcohol, had early septic shock, and the cause of sepsis was pneumonia, most possibly because of nosocomial acquisition. A stage 3 AKI, which was non-oliguric, complicated with severe metabolic acidosis, hypophosphatemia, and hyperammonemia. This patient had advanced liver disease with a child score of 12, a MEL score of 41, an ARC score of 12 with the ACLF grade 3, and a SOFA score of 40. So we'll be discussing the management of volume non-responsive AKI in patients with ACLF. So just about diagnosing and staging, we all know that acute kidney injury is defined based on the KDIGO criteria, and this patient falls well in the KDIGO criteria. And we can identify the spectrum of AKI in patients with liver disease and broadly classify into functional or structural. And we know that hepatorenal syndrome is a volume non-responsive AKI, and most of the times the structural AKI in these patients encountered is acute tubular necrosis and coulombic nephrosis. And these patients have poor response to volume resuscitation. So a good history and physical examination to rule out nephrotoxic drugs, volume losses, sepsis is required to identify the phenotype of AKI. And we can use the urine microscopy further as assessment to identify active sediment, urine albumin, the protein creatinine ratio, and can also use the help of the urine biomarkers like lipocalin-2 and IL-18 to identify an HRS. Now, this is a urine microscopy of 3 different patients who had volume non-responsive AKI and ACLF. This is a bland microscopy, which is suggestive of HRS. And in patients who have HRS as well as coulombic, you can see here that these patients have bile cast, nephropathy. And in patients with acute tubular necrosis, we can see here that the urine microscopy shows granular casts. So this is how the phenotype of AKI can be differentiated, and why is it important? And I'll show you some data here. And this is the very interesting data which has come out in patients with ACLF, where we tried to assess almost a panel of 19 biomarkers to identify and phenotype the volume non-responsive AKI. And we can see here that they are distinct phenotype, and all the injury biomarkers, and I've shown here only the relevant ones, cystatin C, renin, and NGAL, were markedly elevated in acute tubular necrosis, and they were suppressed in coulombic nephrosis and HRS AKI and no AKI. However, the repair biomarkers like EGF, the calbidin, and osteopontin, as we can see here with the red dots, the green dots in HRS were all higher, again showing a very markedly repair process in these patients who have HRS AKI or CN as compared to patients who have ATN. And systemic inflammation is a hallmark of AKI in patients with ACLF and is a driver for organ failures. And therefore, you can see here that in early stages in HRS, AKI, and bulimic nephrosis, the patients have markedly elevated the pro-inflammatory cytokines and suppressed anti-inflammatory cytokines. However, in patients with acute tubular necrosis, contrary to this, there is a suppressed state and these patients are already in the immunoparalytic stage. So how do we manage AKI in these patients? We have to do an appropriate volume expansion and assess the volume, and the choice of albumin is better as compared to crystalloids because these patients have capillary leak and therefore colloids are preferable. And we use the dynamic indices for assessment of the volume, and targets that we keep in these patients is targeting a good MAP, a urine output, and aiming for lactate clearance. And what also is very important is to assess the hypovolemia. And if your patient is mechanically ventilated, we can use a transpulmonary thermodilution, which we usually do in such sicker patients. And we also do intra-abdominal pressure monitoring, which can tell us about the capillary leak, and tensitis, which can give us a guidance for volume assessment and management. Now, hemodynamic management and role of vasoconstrictors, very important. We have to target a good MAP above 80 to achieve a reversal of hepatorenal syndrome. And this is the data of a randomized controlled trial, which we did in our center in patients with acute and chronic liver failure, comparing HRS AKI and the management with terlipressin given as a continuous infusion versus norepinephrine. However, contrary to data for decompensated patients with liver disease, we found that in patients with acute and chronic liver failure, terlipressin is much more superior and aims better reversal of HRS as compared to norepinephrine. And most of these patients, almost 70%, required renal replacement therapy, and which was done early in the course of the disease in patients who had partial or non-response to terlipressin. So now we'll go back to our case and we'll see here that our patient was also hypervolemic. He was given almost 2 liters of fluid prior to when he was received to the ICU. His lung water indices, after we placed a volume view flow track, we found that the lung water was elevated. His PVPI was also high and he was severely vasodilated with a SVR of 389. So this patient had a hyperdynamic circulatory state. His intra-abdominal pressure was 18 centimeters of water. We did not give him any further fluids. We started him on terlipressin over and above the norepinephrine at a dose of 1 mg over 24 hours and targeted a MAP of 80 to 85. And let's see the phenotype of this volume non-responsive AKI. And you can see here the urine microscopy is showing bile cast and bilirubin crystal. And the urine protein to creatinine ratio of this patient was also high. The urine spot sodium was high. And these biomarkers we did as a part of our research protocol. And we found that the NGAL levels, the renin levels, and the KIM1 levels were all elevated. And the osteopontin levels were also high. Now, coming to the management of systemic inflammation, how did we do and manage systemic inflammation in patients who are deeply jaundiced? And this is the data again from a large multicentric study. And I'm showing you there's these graphs in patients with ACLF who were managed with plasma exchange. And we can see here with the red and the blue bars, these are the patients who were responders and non-responders. So all these patients had a decrease in the pro-inflammatory cytokines. There was an improvement in the monocyte function, which was seen in responders, and the monocyte oxidative burst also improved. So it's not that everybody who has a dampening of the inflammation will improve. There is a set of patients who will achieve improvement in the monocyte function and they will achieve a response. So let's look at the markers of systemic inflammation in our patients. They were high. We can see here the TNF alpha, IL-6 level, ferritin level, CRP, and bile acids were all high in this patient. So what did we do in our patients? So as a protocol in our units, for such patients with AKI, we consider plasma exchange followed by CRRT given together as a combo therapy. So initially, this patient underwent plasma exchange, and we can see here, these are the parameters pre and post plasma exchange. And we achieved a reduction in the bilirubin from 39 to 27. And there was some reduction in the creatinine. And subsequently, this patient was initiated on CRRT. And post CRRT, we can see here that by day 3, the creatinine showed an improvement. There was improvement. The consistent improvement in INR. At 48 hours, we did a second session of plasma exchange for this patient. The phosphate showed improvement, ammonia levels, lactate showed improvement, and the bicarbonate also showed improvement. And we can see here the hemodynamic parameters also showed an improvement in the vasodilatory state. There was an improvement in SPR, the lung water indices came down, the PVPI and the leak indices showed an improvement, and the Rotem parameters also showed. So the patient showed an overall improvement and was optimized. And let's look at the biomarkers pre and post CRRT. There was a reduction in the NGAL, renin, CHEM1, and an improvement in the osteopontin level. The urine PCR had shown a decrease. Urine spot sodium showed a decrease. There was reduction in all the pro-inflammatory markers here, we can see, and the bile acids also showed reduction, and this is after plasma exchange and CRRT. So the shock had resolved by 48 hours in this patient. The AKI resolved by almost 72 hours, and this patient was given a sedation interruption at day 3. And we can see here the urine microscopy also showed just renal tubular epithelial cells, and there was absence of bile casts. The pneumonia also showed improvement by day 7, and the X-rays were much clearer. So as a protocol of, we do CRRT in both patients with acute liver failure and acute and chronic liver failure. We consider sustained low efficiency dialysis only as a second option or as a step down therapy in patients who recover on CRRT. And the blood flow rates that we use in these patients is 150 to 180, targeted fluid rates of 20 to 25 ml. So we do a very low dose therapy. And the replacement fluid that we use is a Prismasol without any anticoagulation. So to summarize, ladies and gentlemen, continuous renal replacement therapy in volume non-responsive AKI, improves systemic inflammation, hemodynamics, inflammatory cytokines and bile acids, and preserves the renal function in combination with plasma exchange may be superior, especially in context of patients with acute on chronic liver failure and also in acute liver failure. And we suggest that timely initiation of CRRT should be considered in patients with liver failure and volume non-responsive AKI for optimum results and benefits. And I thank you for your very kind attention.